One of the cool Easter eggy things about Mike Flanagan's adaptation of Haunting of Hill House is that every time you rewatch it, you catch new, unsettling things that you didn't notice the first time around. Like, right there. Did you see that? How about there? He adds these creepy ghosts in the background of a lot of the shots in the show. Here's another one. You don't usually notice them on your first viewing, but your brain knows that something is slightly off, and they contribute to giving the show this eerie vibe that you can't quite put your finger on. The whole viewing experience is slightly uncanny. Now, if you don't already know, the TV show Haunting of Hill House is inspired by the book of the same name by the great Shirley Jackson. And I say inspired by because the book and the show are very different animals. While the main ideas are the same, the details of each are wildly different, and as a result, I really think it's worth it to experience both. This video is going to be spoiler-free for both the book and the show. I'll just be talking about one short scene, which doesn't give anything away for the main plot. If you've only seen the show and not read the book, or if you haven't experienced either, I hope this video convinces you that the book is worth picking up. Now, when I first saw the show, I hadn't read the book yet, so I assumed that Flanagan must have just added these ghosts as a bit of his own creative touch. You can't really show ghosts in the background of a book, right? This sort of thing doesn't really lend itself to the written medium. But I recently read the book, and I came to realize that, yes, these ghosts are an invention of the show, but they're not completely made up. Shirley Jackson does the exact same kind of thing in the book, just in her own slightly different way. She can't literally show ghosts on screen because she's writing a book, but she does something very similar, something which is more suited to the written medium, and something which shows her complete mastery of creating dread and suspense with her writing. Flanagan shows you visual ghosts, creeping things in the background that your eyes gloss over, but your brain registers as something that's not quite right. Jackson gives you textual ghosts, subtle lines or phrases that you can easily gloss over when reading fast, but if you stop and examine them closely, you realize that these phrases actually contain some of the most terrifying imagery in the whole book. Mike Flanagan's ability to take Jackson's unique writing style and translate it into something completely different, but which also works on screen, is one of the things that I think makes his show one of the all-time great book-to-TV adaptations. But before I get into specific examples, I want to pause and take a brief moment to talk about what makes a good adaptation. Specifically, when we're talking about adapting books to screen, what is it exactly that makes some movies and TV shows great and some just not work at all? Is a good adaptation something that is as accurate as possible, where the creators painstakingly lift each scene from page to screen and we just watch exactly what we could have read? Actually, I think that can be fun to watch. Not everyone has time to read a whole book, and so there's real value in providing the same content just in a different medium. But for me, most of the time, this isn't exactly what I'm looking for. For me, a great adaptation captures the spirit of the original, but does something different with it. A great adaptation isn't a replication, it's a translation. I think of adaptations similarly to how I view covers of songs. In 2016, Rihanna included a cover of the song Same Ol' Mistakes by Tame Impala on her album Anti. Rihanna's version is fine. It's very accurate. It hits all the same notes and rhythms as the original. But that's the problem. I'm not looking for a cover to be accurate. If I wanted something that sounded just like the original song, I would just listen to the original song. It's right there on Spotify. The problem is that Rihanna's version doesn't really have a good reason for existing. There's nothing uniquely Rihanna about it. It's just kind of karaoke. Now, I'm not trying to be overly harsh to Rihanna here. I generally like her music, but I think this illustrates a larger point about art. If your personality doesn't shine through in the art that you make, I'm not sure why I should care about it. Now, let's take another example of a cover. Whitney Houston's amazing rendition of the Dolly Parton classic, I Will Always Love You. Dolly Parton's version is soft, introspective, and emotional. Houston's version is also emotional, but in a much more powerful, commanding way. It also just happens to be one of the greatest vocal performances of all time. Whitney Houston clearly made the song her own. And this is the core of what I think makes a great adaptation. Keeping the heart and spirit of the original, while adding your own individual personality to it, so that it becomes something completely different, something unique to you, and something that only you could have created. And this, I think, is what Mike Flanagan does better than most. and what makes his adaptation of Haunting of Hill House so memorable. It's faithful to the original while still being completely different. So, how does this work? Back to my opening example of ghosts in the background, Flanagan throws in these images of ghosts which are easy to miss, but contribute to a general feeling of unease as you watch. You have to pay close attention, but when you do, you see something terrifying. Jackson does the exact same thing, just in a way that fits the written medium. There are tons of scenes where Jackson throws in subtle references and allusions, which are easy to miss, but if you do catch them, they usually conjure up images of death and horror. One striking example is when Eleanor, the main character of Jackson's book, first arrives at Hill House and is shown to her room. All of the rooms in Hill House are named for a particular color. Eleanor's room is the blue room because it's painted and decorated completely blue. When she sees the room, she has a weird thought. She thinks to herself, Sister Anne, Sister Anne. The full passage is on page 27 in my version. It reads, Mrs. Dudley crossed the hall and opened a door, perhaps at random. This is the blue room, she said. From the turn in the staircase, Eleanor assumed that the room would be at the front of the house. Sister Anne, she thought, and moved gratefully towards the light from the room. You can see that the phrase Sister Anne is sort of buried inside a bunch of normal-looking text, easy to gloss over and miss. When I first read it, I thought to myself, that's kind of weird. Is her sister's name Anne? Then I skipped back to the front of the book and reminded myself that, no, her sister's name is Carrie. So I reread it and figured, okay, this must be some kind of reference that I'm too dumb to understand. So I googled, what the hell is Sister Anne? It turns out it's an allusion to a French fairy tale called Bluebeard. Bluebeard is a crazy story, and it's pretty short, so I encourage you to read it yourself. I've linked in the description to the most common version of this story. Bluebeard tells the story of a wealthy man who murders his wives. In the story, Bluebeard's newest wife opens the door to a forbidden room in his castle, where she discovers the bodies of all of his previous wives, who he murdered. Sister Anne is a line that is repeated several times throughout the story. When Eleanor says it here, it calls to mind this horrific scene of murder and death. This is such a subtle and easy to miss line. It's exactly like the ghosts in Flanagan's show. The ghosts in the show are hidden in the background, covered by shadows on the screen, and this Sister Anne line is buried inside a completely ordinary sounding paragraph, and if you're not paying close attention, you can skim right over it. But if you freeze frame and zoom in, you can see both Flanagan and Jackson's ghosts. In the book, the color blue forms the connection in Eleanor's mind to the story of Bluebeard, and that in turn conjures an image of horror and death, subtly foreshadowing the horrors hidden in Hill House itself. It's like reading a mental jump scare, but so subtly done that you can easily miss it. Now, I'm sure Flanagan noticed these subtle ghosts in Jackson's writing, and that they inspired him to put his own twist on this concept, but one that is more fitting for the visual medium. That's the genius of both Flanagan and Jackson's storytelling. They each hide ghosts in plain sight, waiting for you to notice. This is just one example of how Shirley Jackson and Mike Flanagan both create this sense of dread and foreboding in their storytelling, and they each do it in a way that is totally suited to their respective mediums. Once I understood this Sister Anne line in the book, my eyes were primed to find other examples, and there are a ton of other things hidden throughout both the book and the show. If you found any, let me know in the comments which is your favorite.